I believe in a very cross-functional organization. When I look at companies and I study leaders that are out there, I'm not drawn to companies where they have things siloed off. We have this business unit and this business unit and this business unit. I tend to have an environment where folks are much more cross-functionally dependent upon each other. So the first philosophy and style that I've got is I look for leaders. I bring leaders into the organization that they're both domain experts at the area that they're primarily responsible for, but also cross-functional enough in the sense that if I had to have them, if they were on the road in front of any one of our offices and they had a diverse set of employees in that room, I'd want that executive to be comfortable that they can handle questions that would come from even any function in the company, not just their own.
Welcome to Grow Think Tank. This is the one and only place where you will get insight from the founders and the CEOs of the fastest growing privately held companies. I am the host. My name is Gene Hammett. I help leaders and their teams navigate the defining moments of their growth. Are you ready to grow?
Today, we're going to look at how do you lead a company to scale fast. We have a very special guest today. We have Michael DeCesare. He's the CEO of Exabeam. You might recognize the name if you're a longtime listener, because we've had Nir Polak, the founder of Exabeam, on the show twice before. Very big fan of what they're doing and the kind of company they're building. So I thought we would take a look behind the scenes with Michael. What you can learn inside this episode is not just about what it takes to build a strong team, because he talks about some of the specifics there, but he talks about how they really focus on culture, how they focus on developing people around them in the teams. He looks at meeting structure and how that might be a little bit different than what you're doing today. So you'll learn from that as well. All of this unpacked in this episode on how to lead to scale a company that's going fast. All of this is something I love to be able to bring you, and really excited about all the things we're doing here at Core Elevation is our legal name, but also Grow Think Tank. The executive coaching is something that I've been doing for a decade, and just allows me to really impact one person at a time. Leadership development, we added a few years ago because we wanted to impact many people within an organization. And our company's frankly grown because we're not only doing executive coaching at the top levels of the company, but we're also doing leadership development at the mid levels of the company as well. And, closing that gap on leadership skills. So if you're interested in some of those things, make sure you check out what we have going on at genehammett.com. And you can also schedule a call if you want to, just get down and nitty gritty with what's going on in your business. All you have to do is go to genehammett.com and schedule your call today. Now, here's the interview with Michael. Michael, how are you?
Good to be here. How are you doing?
I'm fantastic. Your company's been represented on the podcast almost as much as anyone. This is the third interview from Exabeam, but your first interview. So I appreciate you being here.
Yeah, no, it's good to be here as well. We appreciate you spending time with us over the years.
Well, I want to dive right into this topic of, we're not going to go to the topic yet, but we're going to go into framing the company. Exabeam is sort of the mid-tier security outfit, but you guys have a good footprint inside of Fortune 1000. How would you describe what your company does and what you're known for?
What we're best known for is behavioral analytics. So the ability for us, we take the inputs, all the different companies the cyber companies that companies buy from, they emit digital exhaust, log files, alerts, things that might be useful downstream when customers are investigating things. Exabeam ingests all that data, applies a machine learning model against it that helps us prioritize the things that are the most important to work on, and then drives that experience for customers to be able to drive that process.
That sounds like you got a bunch of wicked smart people.
We've got a very, very strong team for sure.
Well, Michael, we're going to dive into the team and what it takes to run this company. About 600 employees. You guys are north of 100 million in revenue, and you guys are, I don't know what do you want to add to that? Is there anything else you want to add to it before we go into leadership and culture?
No, I think that adequately represents it. We fill a very important void that exists in cybersecurity, and that companies get all of this data, but they don't necessarily know what to do with it. And that's you're right. We have a very smart team. It's a product that requires smart people to be able to design and optimize, and we certainly have our share of those for sure.
When you think about you're stepping in as CEO recently. I had Nir on the show, I don't know if it was about a year ago or more, where he talked about this dilemma of stepping away from being the CEO more into I think a product role and giving a chance to someone who had some more experience, and they weren't sure where they'd find that person or if they would, but you came up, and after probably an exhaustive search of, is this the right person? You've been able to step into Exabeam. What was your reasoning for come to a company like this?
The first was Nir. Nir built an amazing organization, not just of people, but of customers and the product that was built. Nir is still very actively involved. I've been in the CEO job for about 18 months at this point. Nir is still very actively involved in the company. As you pointed out, he's very actively involved in product. He's our chairman of the board. But when I look out at the opportunity base that exists out there, if you look at cybersecurity, kind of the biggest bucket of spend by customers is still endpoint. What used to be my old employer that I ran, McAfee, Symantec, that has given way to CrowdStrike and others. They've kind of reinvented the endpoint security space. The second biggest bucket of spend is in firewall. And the same thing, Palo Alto Network has done quite a good job of kind of reinventing the old firewall space and modernizing that. The third largest bucket of spend by customers in cybersecurity is SIEM, security event management, which is effectively the technology that takes all of the digital exhaust that is spit off of all the different cyber systems, log files, alerts, other things, organizes those and gives those companies the ability to be able to use that data when they get into an investigative process. This hasn't gone through a next generation evolution at this point. And that's what Exabeam is leading and why I was so excited to come lead the company.
Perfect. When you've taken over this job from a founder, it's not the easiest job because people are used to it being done a certain way. What's one of the challenges you had to overcome over the last 18 months?
I think I'm a big sports fan. I think when you look at, a sports team, like occasionally a new coach will come in and it's a lot of the same athletes, but they might play a little bit differently than they did in the prior, but it's still the same people. I think the same experience is here, right? I mean, every human being has different things that they prioritize, different things they're strong at, weak at. I think what Nir and I have done is made sure that we've kept the best of what he brought to the company and then tried to complement that with some of the things, and maybe I can add some more organization. I'm a very operational person. So I think if you ask the folks at Exabeam, we are a very well-run company. Like the processes we have inside the company is the people's jobs, roles, and responsibilities. Those are all super well understood. And that's probably an area that I brought a lot of focus into in my first year and a half.
Well, let's dive into your leadership principles that make all this work. How would you frame those?
How would I frame my leadership principles?
Yes.
Yeah. So first is I believe in a very cross-functional organization. When I look at companies and I study leaders that are out there, I'm not drawn to companies where they have things siloed off. We have this business unit and this business unit and this business unit. I tend to have an environment where folks are much more cross-functionally dependent upon each other. So the first philosophy and style that I've got is I look for leaders. I bring leaders into the organization that are both domain experts at the area that they're primarily responsible for, but also cross-functional enough in the sense that if I had to have them, if they were on the road in front of any one of our offices and they had a diverse set of employees in that room, I'd want that executive to be comfortable that they could handle questions that would come from even any function in the company, not just their own. So I look for folks that both have the domain expertise as well as being highly cross-functional. On top of that, I tend to run meetings to be much more topically based. And what I mean by that is I don't run traditional QBRs where folks come in once a quarter, they each get a time slot, they get up, they give the same slides every meeting about their function, how was it done in the last 90 days. I do those in one-on-ones. Kind of when I bring my team together, I want to use that airtime to debate. I want to put topics on the table that are either going very well or topics that are not going well and we need to be better at, and use the airtime we have for folks to be able to be very cross-functionally involved in things. I find that if you go through that maybe a little bit more challenging process up front, that in the end you have decisions where you get a lot more functional buy-in from the executive team and therefore the employees when they get rolled out.
When you think about building teams that are, strong and able to overcome challenges, what are you looking for when you're aligning those teams together?
I'm looking for, first of all, like when I sit down at the start of the year and I say, what are, for any function, what are the things that you are trying to drive? I look for the metrics that they come up with to be metrics that are cross-functional. I'll give you an example. If my support team came and said, I'm resolving every case in 1 minute, but our customers were coming to us and saying, we're not getting the experience we want out of the support organization, that would be an example of the fact that we have misaligned metrics. So I think, I'm very, very focused on making sure that when we are going through that planning process, that everybody is really in the boat together on the most important metrics that we will use as an organization to drive the business. That's that's first and foremost. The second is I look for folks that can move at startup speed. Lots of people that have experience come from some big companies, but that doesn't always translate well to being able to move downstream to a smaller startup. And the beauty or the terrifying part of being at a startup is it's highly accountable. You know what everybody is doing. You see what everybody is doing. There's no places to hide. And it's very, very obvious when people are and are not pulling their weight. So I look for folks that are able to move at that speed as well.
Now, hold on. Michael's been talking about, the necessary elements of hiring the right people. And you've got to hire people that are being able to work at startup speed. What exactly is that? Well, it's the ability to be resilient, or the ability to go into the unknown and be able to contribute, have ideas. They don't have to be perfect. They have to be, just sharp. And it really is important for people to have this ability to work at startup speed. I don't think it's something you learn very easily. I think a lot of people get frustrated when things are moving too fast. There's a little bit more chaos, but that's exactly the domain in which my coaching, my clients thrive in, is a little bit of chaos, a little bit of conflict, and that helps them move forward. Sometimes it gets in the way, but as they handle it, they're able to continue to drive their business forward and scale fast. I love the fact that you talk about startup speed. I mean, you guys are always inventing, you're pushing the boundaries inside this one sector of cybersecurity, and you've got to do this. Do you have an interview question or a way to determine whether someone has the ability to move at startup speed?
It's an amazing thing, I guess, when you've just been in business for a long time, you get better at this. But I honestly believe I can tell in 30 seconds in an interview whether I'm going to hire somebody or not. Because when someone gets to me, it's not typically about whether they have the pedigree to be in the position. The folks that have interviewed them before it gets to me typically have flushed out if they have the experience base. I'm there more to figure out if they're going to be a good cultural fit for us. And I say this to you half laughing, but my kind of one of my go-to questions is, if you were a nail, how would you behave? Or if you were a quarter, would you be heads or tails? And the reason I ask those questions is just to throw them off. I want to see if someone will BS me and just try to answer the question, even though it's an absurd question, or whether folks will just kind of laugh and step back. And I think that's very indicative to me of how they're going to be in problem solving once they get inside the organization. Near has started this, and I have tried to keep this an absolute priority, but we have an amazing culture at Exabeam. We have, we're 600 plus strong, focused on a very important part of cybersecurity, and we are very focused on the objective of getting this company to be the absolute best run thing that it can be. You can see this everywhere. You can see it. You see people constantly going above and beyond for things that they don't directly own, because we're very mission focused and making sure our customers are successful with our product. So I try to play my part in that when I'm involved in interviews, I think I can be a pretty good data point on whether someone is going to be that cultural fit or not.
Well, just to back this up, I know Newsweek listed you guys as one of the top, what is it, number 23 company on most loved places to work. Is that about right?
That's about right.
So as the leader of this organization, I know there was a strong foundation with the founder, Near, but how have you carried that forward? And if you've made any changes related to the workplace or culture, I'd love to know what those are.
I mean, when you get in one of those lists, it's just such an amazing, confirmation that your employees are enjoying the mission as much as you are. And I see this everywhere. I mean, first is we try to be very communicative with our employees. Back in the days before COVID, I would do things like all hands meetings once a quarter. Now we've moved to once a month. Those are on Zoom now, but it gives us a way to touch base with people nonstop. We have a policy internally. We're quite liberal on the whole kind of remote work topic, but we have a policy of everybody being on all video all the time, which lets you see your employees and understand how they're doing, knowing that they're engaged. We work very hard at diversity, not just diversity in ethnic diversity or gender diversity, but in all aspects of experience in our industry. The easiest thing for someone like me when I come into a new company or any of the executives I've hired would be to fill positions from folks they know in their past. The much harder thing is to interview the industry and choose the best candidate. And, I don't allow any of my executives to come in and just replace their entire team with a team that they used to work with. I think it's on us as executives to kind of keep the best people that you inherit, to be able to complement them with great new hires, and then to work on a culture that is something different than it was before, you arrived, right? But that it's an Exabeam culture. And we focus on all those things, and then lastly is really accountability. It's very empowering for our employees that when you give them visibility into what their budgets are, when you allow them to be much more actively involved in what their objectives are for the year, I find as a leader that you get them much more invested in the success of those objectives. And we have a culture of high accountability as well for folks that are very good at what they do and are doing quite a good job on delivering on their expectations.
Given the fact that you're on the edge of innovation and you're requiring people to do things that have probably never been done in some cases, I would think that you need a lot of leaders, but yet you probably get a lot of people who are managing processes. And I don't want to get into the semantics of it, but do you think about developing the leaders on the teams? And you guys have internal programs to do that?
Like any small startup, we have programs, but we don't necessarily have full dedicated teams towards things like that. When you talk about enablement, that's a typical area that a little bit will exist in all parts of the business, but it's not a centralized function for us yet. When you bring folks in, there's no perfect profile for a hire, right? You could hire the perfect person out of college. There's going to be stuff that you have to train them on. You might hire an engineer who's very good at the area that you are directly in, but hasn't managed before. Or you might hire an engineer that's very good at managing, but doesn't have the domain expertise in the areas that you're building product. And it's on us as a leadership team to be able to advance those, those folks, to be able to recognize that they have areas that they're very strong and areas that they want to learn more in, and to be able to provide that context. And we're getting better at this as we go. It's also, as I'm sure you've seen in the companies that you've talked to, it's not becoming uncommon now for companies to have an excess of a 20% annual employee attrition rate. That's actually becoming more of the norm. It's amazing kind of what a high percentage, especially in high tech, are leaving jobs and moving to new places. And I don't mind that, to be honest. I mean, you never want to lose good people, but it's every time that somebody leaves, it's an opportunity for us to go interview an amazing industry and try to find new people as well. But it puts a lot of pressure on us as a leadership team to be able to enable those folks and make them successful. And that's a lot of what my job is. I see myself as the chief cultural officer inside the company. Like, my job is to have my finger on the pulse of what's going well and what's not, and then to be designing things that help people feel more empowered.
Now, Michael just said something that was really interesting, and I want to put the spotlight on it for a second. That he feels like it's the responsibility of the leadership team to advance the people around them on the teams. What I interpret that as meaning is it's not okay just to get the work done, just to meet the metrics, execute on the plan, the strategy. You've got to develop the people around you. You've got to develop their skills as leaders. You got to develop their skills as managers, sometimes communication skills. Everything is on the table as people need to grow, because if your company is scaling fast, you want to make sure that those people are scaling just as fast. Their ability to serve bigger teams or move at a faster pace or to innovate continues. And that is on leadership. So I love the fact that he said that. And I just want to put a spotlight on it for you. Back to Michael. I want to finish up our conversation today, Michael, with the hard-hitting question. There's a lot of founders that get to a point inside their business where they can't continue on. Either the board forces them out, or private equity, or something happens. You didn't come in those circumstances. Nir stepped aside because he wanted to focus on different aspects of the business and bring in someone who had a lot more experience like you, Michael. But why do you think CEOs don't make the transition as companies grow at the scale at which you guys have reached?
Yeah. I mean, so first with Exabeam specifically, I mean, this was 100% driven by Nir. I never would have come in and taken the role if Nir and I had not spent a lot of time together before I took the job. Nir, as I mentioned, is still fully involved in the business and adding value every single day. And I think that the best examples that you see out there when you have someone that comes in like me is when the prior CEO still stays in the business, but focuses on other aspects. But hats off to Nir to recognize that the company had gotten to a scale point where we're starting to maybe get to a place where he didn't necessarily feel like he was the best fit to take that job or to run that job. I think when you talk about this a little bit more generically across the industry, it's not surprising to me. It's kind of when you used to walk into the venture capital office, they were big believers in founder-led companies, and they still are to a large extent. But it's becoming much, much more common at different stages of the company to go get expertise, whether it's in a specific function or sometimes at the top of the company. And it doesn't surprise me that there are founders that don't make that transition. Not everybody is perfect at both the left and right side of their business, right? And what I mean by that is, as a starter, you're bootstrapping the company. You typically are very technical. You're involved deeply in the engineering. You can touch every customer because there's only a dozen of them or something like that. But then you get to a point when you see companies like us that have grown super fast and gotten large and made that transition from startup to kind of larger business. You get to a point where there's different areas that the CEO has to focus on. It's more operational. It's a lot more about hiring and firing and raises and demotions and things that you have to go through as a CEO. You start to get into areas like legal and finance and HR that were easy when you were small, but now require real time. And I think it was I just don't think it's everybody that is capable of handling both those very hectic startup days, but also is an expert at managing scale as large organizations get better or get larger, I should say.
And I do remember before you hit the recorder, you said there was an aspect of right brain and left brain to this.
Yeah.
How would you frame that in for us?
So there's a very evangelical aspect to starting a company, and you have to have this incredible vision, but you have to be willing to operate in an environment that doesn't necessarily have a beginning and end. It's much more hectic. There's nobody in functions that eventually the company will have dedicated. But when you start to get scale, you get more towards that operational side of things, right? Where it's got to have order, you've got to have governance, you've got to have committees, you've got to, whereas 5 people could just get in a room and resolve something when we were $5 million in revenue, now that's not possible because the organization's larger. And I just think that's the right brain aspect of this, the concept that you have to be more operationally focused and focused more on execution, and just bringing those things together is always an interesting challenge.
Michael, you've had a great answer for all of these things that we're talking about. I really respect what Exabeam's doing and where you guys are going in the marketplace, and appreciate you being here.
I appreciate you having us and paying attention to us over the years. We look forward to very fun things in front of this company and look forward to keeping the relationship open.
What a great interview. I love him talking about his interview questions, even though that would probably throw me off a little bit. Hopefully I would answer that right now that I know the answer. But I love finding out what people's favorite interview questions are. Talking about meetings. Hopefully you took notes on that too, about how he runs meetings that are a little bit different than most people. It's not just status updates. They really tackle some of the topical issues that are going on. It is better use of the time to do that as opposed to just talk about the status of these things and go over a few of the metrics. They really get into the debate and collaboration as they solve problems, move forward. When you think about your leadership style and the way you lead your company, hopefully you're learning from these interviews. If you have any questions about how to fill in the gaps, whether it be your time, your skill set, your energy set, or even your mindset, those are the main areas at which I focus on within my coaching. I'd love to talk to you, get to know you. Just go to genehammett.com and schedule a call. When you think of growth and you think of leadership, think of Growth Think Tank. As always, lead with courage. We'll see you next time.